just before we even come about the latest thing you've done, for those who do not know you, tell us a bit about what you've done in the past as far as elections are concerned.
Well, a very good evening to your good self and to our cherished viewers. I am Professor Sarpong. I teach and I research, and I'm the director in charge of the Institute of Research, Innovation and Development here at the Kumasi Technical University. I took interest in elections research way back in 2014, and on my own and on the quiet, I was trying to validate some of the works I had done relative to the actuals that came 2016 elections and the midway party level and constituency level elections that came. So I was ready by 2020 to put out my first national prediction in respect of elections 2020, and I did that. Many firms media firms did cover that. Your brother Edward here in Kumasi covered it live. I met the press as I do all the time, and then we discussed. They had interesting questions to ask. When the message went out, depending on which side it fell, they wouldn't take the content. They took it at different levels, some perceiving that I had gone to take money from somewhere, to the NDC, who, per my prediction in 2020, was moving from 43 to 47%, felt they had done more and were going to win, and so my prediction was bought. My friend Kwamizu, who was the secretary then, came to me and said, it's still 10%, and so whatever amount of money I've gone for, I should pay my tithe. It was on a lighter note, but that was how it was perceived. Those in the MPP felt they've done a lot of work, and this and that, free SHS that. So they were going to get, some said 56%, and so on and so forth. So my 51.4 prediction for the MPP was still not taken as something realistic, because they were expecting to get more. Yes, the reality came, and I predicted 51.4, the MPP got 51.3, and then the NDC also got the 47 I predicted. So that was in 2020. Midway, I predicted regional level contest because, again, let me say, I don't do this as my main work. I am a university professor, and I do a lot of book writing, article publication. I have articles in environment, agriculture, a lot of industry-driven research work. I don't do it as frequent as many, but anytime I took interest, I had a very high accuracy.
So in all these three instances, you did a survey which was statistically representative, and that snapshot helped you predict who was going to win. Is that correct?
Correct.
Good. Now I need to differentiate that from Musa, who does sort of this more regularly, because you said you gave me three instances: 2020, one to me, MPP primaries for Ashanti chairman, and then the replacement of Napo. Now Musa Dankwa, you do polls, so yours is very frequent.
Yes.
So Smart is a social scientist. When he's interested in elections, he does a big survey, and then he uses the survey results to predict the outcome. So it means that he models after the survey results, and then he comes up with his result. How different is that from what you do?
Ours is opinion polls, which are quite snappy.
Opinion polls?
Opinion polls, very snappy, and taken over a shorter period of time.
Okay.
We don't go beyond 10 days when we're doing an opinion poll, because political opinion polls get distorted with some noises if it drags on over a longer period of time. And remember, the question is, if the elections are held today, who would you vote for? So we are quite particular about the period of the polling.
Okay.
And the questions are close-ended, not open-ended.
All right.
So we don't find out why those reasons. Those are for researchers who want to inform political parties as to what they can do. We're just measuring opinion at a point in time. So it has to be frequent, so they can pick the trend. And if there are any noises over a period of time, the averages will remove the noises that you have in the data.
Does that mean that your sample size will be smaller?
Yes, smaller but reflective of the population size, because look, the confidence level and the margin of error you want to entertain determines the sample size. The least, or not the least, if you want to have a sample size of, let's say, 99% confidence level in national survey in Ghana, and a margin of error of say just 1%, that you must interview around 16,000 voters. But if you want to have a margin, but 1.5% margin of error, the sample size drastically shrinks. So moving from 0.1% of margin of error upward or downward changes the sample size dramatically. But because we do it frequently, we don't believe that we have to do that big sample size every 90 days or every week that we do the polls.
Good. So, Prof. Sarpong, your survey helped you model a potential winner, and in the model, your prediction is that nobody is likely to win the first round, and that the NPP candidate is much closer to 50, Dr. Bawumia, than John Mahama, and that NPP is also likely to win majority of the parliamentary seats than the NDC. Is that a good summary of the prediction?
A good summary, yes. Bernard, you always do good summaries. So
wonderful.
You attended pre-sec.
So how do you move from the survey results into the model? Because I know that the survey asks many questions, yet to predict, you have to, for example, do things like voter turnout, and then you take the constituencies that you used and sort of do some assumptions. So I just wanted to explain to viewers how you did your model to come up the conclusion that I just summarized.
Yes, Bernard, thank you so much. And I can appreciate your understanding of how these modelings are done. So knowing what to need in order to model, you have to inculcate all those needs into the set of questions you are asking. So for example, to estimate turnout, I tried to ask the difference between 2020 and then 2024 expected turnout. So once I ask you whether you voted in 2020 and you said yes, it gives me an estimate. That estimate will be matched with the recorded estimate for the constituency, and I have all the turnout estimates for all 275 constituencies that voted in 2020, all. So presidential, parliamentary, whether you voted, the estimate that I got for my survey is matched against the historic estimate for that constituency, and then I strike the difference and get what I call a tuner, like a coefficient, the difference between the what I'm having and what actually occurred. Then the next question will be, would the person be voting in 2024? Once the person says yes, it is then interpolated to get an estimate that is reflective of that constituency. Sometimes it is below the 2020 turnout, sometimes it is a little above the 2020 turnout. But I mean, it is not deviating so much from the normal. If you compare the asked previous, the actual previous, and then the expected voters or turnout for 2024. So if you check my report, I have regional turnouts, I have the national turnout, which is 81.4, and then I can even have constituency turnouts, which I have in Excel for those who care about detailed content of the estimation of the turnout. So we have estimated turnout. Then we come to the actuals. In the actuals, I try to match perceived versus early voting. So I did two things. Perception. The person is giving me a snapshot of the community we are in, or the suburb we are in, or the area we are in, how the voting pattern works, and how the coming election, the voting pattern is going to be, whether it is going to change in pattern or is going to remain in pattern. Then the person is asked who he thinks that in that neighborhood, if elections were held, was going to be likely supported. Then he makes those choices. Then finally, I give you a template of the sheet, the voter register. No, there's a voter, the template, the ballot paper, I mean. And then you make a choice as to if you were voting. That's what I call the early voting. The last part of my question, the set of questions, is early voting. The you vote. So I have perception of the community I am in, their voting pattern in the past, whether the voting pattern is going to change or not, as demonstrated or answered, responded to by the people who lives there. And then I have their own view in respect of who is likely to be supported. And then I have the final one, which is the ballot that they actually voted. So I have early voting results that followed all the 13 arrangements, may her soul rest in peace. Now, if I'm supposed to do a new one, Madam will not be part of it. But people actually voted.
All right, quick question.
And then we have the understanding of how the model will be done, because you now have all the parameters.
And based on this 81% turnout, Bawumia has 49, Mahama has 45. If you reduce the turnout to say 70, does the outcome change?
Fantastic. So I have scenarios. So if you check the one on the screen now, you see scenario 1. The scenario 2 is just the question you asked, if you should reduce the turnout. So last year, 2020, no, it's not last year, last election, 2020 turnout was around 79%. So I have that scenario. Still nobody crosses the 50% mark. Then we have scenario 3, which is what I call the highest estimable turnout possible. So that one I pegged it around 85.6. I know it's too huge based on the historic turnout data that we have, but just to hypothetically see if turnout should increase, whether it will have an effect on the crossing of the 50% mark. And that works based on the regional contributions into the national turnout, if we should go the highest possible turnout. So turnout will definitely have an impact on who crosses the 50%.
Based on the historical turnout for elections in Ghana, why didn't you give me a 70? Because you have 81 scenario, 79 scenario, and 85. If you look at our historical votes, 2000 turnout 63%, 2004 85, 2008 69.5, 2012 79, 2016 68.6, 2020 79.5. So quickly you see that every 4 years turnout changes, so that the higher turnouts are usually within the first 4 years, and the lower turnouts are in the 8th year. So if you take 2000, it was if you start as time series from 2000, 2004 was a 4th year. So there's an incumbent, Kufuor, 85%. 2008, he's not on the ballot. Turnout goes below 70. 2012, there's an incumbent. It comes down. You follow me? So it's 2008. Forgive me. It comes down to 69. 2012, there's an incumbent president. It goes up. 2016, there's sort of 8-year cycle ends. So it would be interesting to have checked what you did with a turnout of say 70 to give us a good sense of possible scenarios. Your scenarios have very high turnout estimates, which the data doesn't necessarily support, or the history.
Yeah, but the 79% is just the recent history, the 2021. And even this 81.4 I have estimated, it still fits into 2020 turnout. You remember 2020, the parliamentary turnout across the country averages to 81.3%. What it means is that there are some Ghanaians who went to the polls, voted for their parliamentary candidate, and ignored the presidential votes. That is why presidential turnout is 79.5, but parliamentary turnout is 81.3, 2020.
But 70, I just said that 79 81 are still very close to each other. Maybe what you can do later for me is maybe as a bonus after this, you can do a scenario of say 69 70, and let's see what happens.